Hi, this is Paul, and I have the privilege today to introduce David Lewis to you. And I first came across David Lewis's name when someone from my meetup in Sacramento relocated to Dallas, and he said, oh, there's a meetup in a church right here in Dallas too. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So David, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Father David Lewis. I'm at Saints Constantine and Helen Orthodox Church here in Carrollton, Texas. It's a suburb of Dallas. It's all one big mess. And I've, I was first introduced to Jordan Peterson through a friend over email. He suggested I'd check him out, and I blew him off. But then Jordan Peterson sent somebody to my church. Like this guy shows up in my church and says, yeah, I decided that I want to raise my daughters Christians. And I said, well, let's talk. So we met for coffee, and he told me he'd been watching some videos, and he was convinced that the only hope for our country was if was a revival of Christianity, and he wanted to raise his daughters Christians, and so I thought, all right, if this Jordan Peterson guy is sending people to my church, I need to check him out. So I dove into all his videos and went through the biblical series, all his classes that he's got. I've watched all the classes, and I've gotten a lot out of him. I'm a fan of him as a teacher, as a clinician. I think he's a synthesizer and a popularizer. He makes things accessible to people. He's made things accessible to me that I wouldn't have encountered had it not been for him. And he's been just a joy to watch. And then there's this phenomenon that started happening. I don't remember when it was that I saw. I think I saw one of your first videos about the meetup, and I thought to myself, well, obviously, why wouldn't I do that? So I did exactly what you did. I posted a meetup, and they came, and they've been coming since last February, almost 11 months now. We were once a month for about the first 6 months, and then they said, can we do this more often? And I said, okay. So we meet twice a week on Saturday nights after Vespers. Wow. And I don't think we've had fewer than 10 people once.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Twice a week or twice a month?
I'm sorry, twice a month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, twice a month, Saturday nights.
Wow. So you do Saturday nights?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've looked at the Saturday night space, and the group was kind of, yeah, we'd come, but it wasn't their preferred night. So yeah, that's interesting.
Well, it's interesting the other way. I hadn't really considered another night, because it works well for my schedule, because I'm here at church on Saturday nights anyway. We're done by 6, so it works well.
So now we started out talking before I started recording about the conversation I had with John Van Donk. You want to share a little bit what you shared with me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed his classification. His classification of the general fandom of the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. But I've noticed that in my meetups there have been considerably fewer of the buckos than I had maybe expected I would find, and my guess is that has something to do with self-selecting nature of meetup.com, You know, if you only advertise it this way, you're only going to find people that are looking to go to a meeting about something. And but we've definitely had a fair number of, I'd say the mix has probably been about 50-50 Christians versus atheists.
Okay.
And Christians of all stripes and atheists of all stripes,
Yeah.
you know, according to the classification set up. But definitely a lot of you know, lay people who are interested in philosophy, and you know, I might take issue a little bit with it's not just armchair philosophers who are satisfied, who are tickled by JBP's anti-postmodern rants. There's also this group who sort of sees him as a defender of the Christian West, and you know, sort of it's like a part of the culture war. You know, the intramural civil war in Christianity that you've talked about.
Yep.
I think that's a good way to put it. So we get a lot of those people too.
Now you're in Texas, so you're in the Bible Belt, which probably makes some of the sampling of people you're getting a bit different than, say, Sacramento, California, over here on the left coast.
Yeah, I'll bet that's right.
We probably have a higher percentage of skeptics.
Mm-hmm.
But so what have you done in your meetups? Do you have a program that you do, or do you just?
No. The first several months, all I did was suggest that we introduce ourselves, and maybe say how you got interested in Jordan Peterson, and that generally took 2 hours.
Yep, that was my experience too.
I've talked to other priests in my diocese about this, and you know, told them what I'm doing, and I've tried to tell them, look, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is provide a space, give people an opportunity. Like, this conversation is happening.
That's right. Like,
people are talking about Christianity and philosophy and culture in this really interesting way, in a sustained way. Like, the conversation keeps happening.
That's right.
And it's happening whether we're involved in it or not.
That's right.
But we could be involved.
That's right. Why wouldn't we?
It's a no-brainer.
This is what blows me away when I try to talk to other CRC pastors about it. I'm like, just open your door. You don't even have to be an expert, but just let them talk and have the conversation and be available. That's all you need to do.
And you know, on my this is my defense against the incessant meddler charge. On my meetup post, you know, I promised that there would be no sell, there'd be no pressure, and I've kept to that. You can ask Dustin if he'll back me up. But you know, invariably at some point during a meeting, somebody's going to say, well, what about this? And you know, ask me a question about Christianity, and you know, so you know, but it's just part of the conversation. And really, I've gotten more out of. I'm pretty sure I've gotten more out of this than anybody else has. Yeah. It's really been a joy to meet all of these people. It's been fun having these conversations. Like, it reminded me of my grad school days when you know, conversations like this were you know, falling off the wall at you, and it's, you know, because you were surrounded by that sort of person. And you know, it's been a while. You know, now I'm a dad with 4 kids, and you know, I don't have time for that sort of thing anymore. But all of a sudden, I get to talk about this really cool stuff,
That's right.
And then I'm learning a lot of stuff that I'd never encountered before. Not just from Peterson and the other IDW guys, although I've really enjoyed Jonathan Haidt and the Blogging Heads guys, and podcasting and YouTube has really changed the way I encounter information in the last couple of years. And it really started with Peterson, but it's spread past that. But aside from them, I learn a lot from the people who come to the meetups. It's just been a really great time.
But I always tell the people at the meetups, I'll say, I talk a lot on my videos. If you want to hear what I have to think, you just listen to my videos. But when it comes to the meetup, I want to hear from them. And right. I learn so much every time. And so we usually have kind of our regular 2-hour meeting. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the 2 hours, I announce time and say, okay, well, we've been here 2 hours. Anybody who wants to leave, they can always leave whenever they wanted to. Anyway, that kind of gives people permission of time to leave. But like last night, we started at 4. I was a little late in closed the meeting, official meeting at 6:30. And I had to kick them all out at 10:15. And that is,
wow.
I didn't learn that at first. And so the first time I did it, it was 1:30 in the morning. And we're still at church talking, and the phone rings, and I thought, I know exactly who that is. That's my wife. And so I pick up the phone. She's like, "Where are you?" I mean, first of all, she's a little nervous. Who are these people you're meeting with, and are they dangerous? And well, they're dangerous, but not in the normal kind of way you might think.
Right. They could possibly be dangerous to my career.
So have you gotten any kind of input from the other priests, or do they just kind of stare at you and kind of like,
they're always polite, they're always interested, and there have been enough little clips of Peterson saying something positive about the Orthodox Church that somebody will chime in and say, "Oh yeah, I heard he said something good about us," and so like there's no negative reaction. I don't get any. I've never gotten any flack from it. It just varies from blank stares to oh, that's interesting, and a few people say, "Oh, that's a really great idea," and like there's a department of missions and evangelism in our archdiocese. And they found out about what I was doing, and they did a little video. I don't think it got a lot of response. I can't figure out why more people are not doing it. Yeah. I don't get it. Like no negative response, but I don't see it spreading either.
No. I've had exactly the same response in the CRC, and we haven't had. We've got me, but Jonathan Peugeot has obviously been a big piece of this movement.
Yeah.
And many people, especially in terms of the Orthodox. And so one of the guys who came last night mentioned, he'd just been to a second Orthodox service. And so some of the people who come my way have been visiting Orthodox churches. And, but it's unlike a lot of evangelical churches, becoming a member of an Orthodox church is not an instant. I mean, some evangelical churches, you show up, you raise your hand, boom, you hit the water, you're in, baby.
Right.
Not so with the Orthodox.
That's where I come from. So I know about that, but no, it's going to take at least a year.
Okay. So you grew up evangelical.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, so we went to Baptist churches when I was a kid, or Bible churches, but they were really the same. There wasn't a distinction being made in our minds about Baptist or Bible church or that sort of thing. But really the main influence on my family was actually Youth for Christ, which is one of these parachurch organizations that popped up in the 40s. a lot like Young Life or Campus Crusade. So I had family that were involved in that, professionally for a couple of generations, and so yeah, so I was still going to Baptist churches, and I think I got saved about 12 times and baptized twice by the time I graduated high school. I don't mean to make light of my people. I'm very thankful for the upbringing that I have. They taught me the faith. They taught me to believe. They gave me faith. They taught me the scriptures. Sometimes when I'm preaching, I still end up quoting a passage from scripture that I memorized when I was 10.
Yep.
So thank God.
Yep.
But when I had my questioning phases in high school and college, and when I was in college, I started getting a little disenchanted with the cult of personality that, if you have a good preacher, then next thing you need is a building program, and blows up, and I met a guy in the philosophy department who suggested I go to his PCA church, and they fed college students after church, so it sounded like a good deal, and so I went, found out they sprinkled babies, and that was a little scandalous, especially because I could tell, like, they had all the other markings of real Christians. I could see these were sincere believers, but what were they doing baptizing infants? So I asked, and their answer was surprisingly scriptural and sound theology, and it showed me a vision of the church as a community of believers that exists through time that I had been unfamiliar with, that I had never encountered before. And so that was really the start. And I think studying philosophy had something to do with it too, because I learned that the things that we believe, we believe in communities, and that I learned to distrust the idea of an individual approaching a text in a vacuum, because that doesn't happen. We learn how to interpret the scriptures from other people. We learn how to pray from other people, and so the question of which people do I want to learn these things from got real important. And I spent some time with the CRC.
Really?
Yeah, in South Bend with Len Mandersy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, Len and I are going to have a conversation one of these days, because I know Len.
I don't know if I mean he would certainly not remember me. I was just a person in the crowd. But I really enjoyed listening to him, and I met a lot of Catholics when I was there who it was a similar experience. They did and said things that I really couldn't handle, but I could tell that they were real Christians, and so I had to find out what was going on. And their answers were once again surprisingly biblical and sound theologically, and so that was a challenge. But eventually I got convinced that that worship really ought to be focused on Christ as He presents Himself to us in the Eucharist, and that bishops are good, that the authority of the church is important, and and the authority of the church to teach me and to form me matters. And then I eventually met a crazy Orthodox guy who taught me a couple of things about prayer, and I decided to visit his church, and a year later I was in.
Wow.
So that's
And
how that happened.
how did you then take on holy? I don't know what's called in the Orthodox tradition. Is it orders or office or?
Yeah, holy orders.
Orders. Okay.
Yeah, sure. You can say that. Well, it's a while later. I remember watching my priest do a service and thinking, oh, that's what I want. That's what I want to do with my life. And so I told him that thought occurred to me, and he laughed out loud. He LOL'd me before that was a thing, and said, "So wait a few years." He said, "Talk to me in 3 years." So 3 years went by, and I said, "Hey, you remember what I said?" "I'm still thinking that." And he said, "Okay, let's talk to the bishop." So we talked to the bishop, and the bishop said, "That's a good idea, but you should wait a year." And so I said, okay. And, I just got married. We had a new baby, and he said, wait a year. And he came back to visit the next year, and he said, yeah, it's time. And so off we went to seminary in New York, and the rest is history.
Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful. So how did you get to Dallas then?
Well, out of seminary, I was assigned as the assistant in Austin.
Okay.
For 5 years, and then about 5 years ago, I was assigned here.
Okay. It strikes me as interesting that both you and Jonathan Peugeot had prehistories in the evangelical church, and both you and Jonathan are also willing to engage constructively and openly with Peterson. I wonder if there's something to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will take issue with one thing that you and Van Donk said.
Only one? Go ahead.
Well, he was saying there's this crowd that's pulling for Peterson to end up on their team, right?
Right.
And I've never thought that was especially likely. I think I agree with you completely about that. I mean, he's hard to peg. He's trying to figure out what he's doing on the fly, it seems to me. And a minute, like, did you see the interview with Patrick Coffin?
Yes.
Where he said it seems to me that you're either a lapsed Catholic, a closet Catholic, or a future Catholic. Which is it? And so Peterson's answer was, well, why not Orthodox? And so a lot of my people said, hey, see, well, I say that I've never actually met people who really think that he's gonna come to my team. But it doesn't matter. He has already done a tremendous service for churches of every stripe, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So what's your take on? So you're in the camp. Actually, I was watching Adam Friended and Sitch, PSA Sitch did a live stream yesterday that I was actually chopping up this morning and thinking maybe about doing a video on. And part of the early on in my videos, I did a video comparing Peterson to Jim and Pam on The Office, in that on these sitcoms, there's always this tension. Will Jim and Pam get together? Will Jim and Pam get together? And that's part of the Peterson fascination. It's the Truman Show, and like, how will it end? What will happen to Peterson? And some people think, so Owen Benjamin says, oh, he's just stringing us along. He's teasing us. He's duplicitous. It's not my take at all. Other people like, oh, he's in process. Other people, no, he's so what's your take? Is he in process? Is he just himself?
Well, I think that he's largely himself. I did see one time on I think it was a Reddit Ask Me Anything. Somebody asked him, so why will you only endorse it? Why won't you endorse Christianity explicitly? And his answer was, because it's more effective to endorse it implicitly. And that could have been just an answer. But I mean, he's pretty self-conscious. He's thinking about what he's doing and the effect that it's having. But I really think that what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
I think he's working through stuff.
Yeah.
I wish he'd get back to the biblical lectures. That's for sure.
You and a whole lot of other people.
That'd be great.
There's a certain amount of we in our meetup last night. There's a certain amount of angst that. So he'll be doing his book tour, so-called book tour, until May, and then he'll pause and do reading. He says he's going to do the biblical lectures in November, and then his new book's going to come out in January, and then I imagine the book tour on 12 more rules starts all over again. Perhaps,
yeah.
if in fact, it's so hard to know if the level of excitement and enthusiasm stays where it is now. That kind of
Right.
thing is hard to maintain and hard to predict.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's a lot more interesting stuff that he could be doing.
I agree 100%. We looked at, so Jordan went through at least the present draft of his 12 new rules on the question and answer that he did yesterday. When he releases things on Sunday morning, it's like, come on, Jordan,
Yeah, right.
All days of the week you got to do it on a Sunday morning. I mean, I don't got a lot of time on Sundays.
Yeah, him and Ben Shapiro.
That's right. Give a little love over here to us lying, manipulative opportunists.
Right. Shapiro's got an excuse. Sunday's his Monday.
That's right. And Peterson, it was so funny because, the last few things, Peterson's been in this strange place. I'm looking at this place. I'm thinking, what is this place? Well, it's his son's basement. So then it's like, oh, you're living in your son's basement, which means your son has to go down to the underworld to rescue his father.
That's right.
This is very archetypal.
Perfect.
So where do you think, so right now, so this was our 1-year anniversary meetup that we had last night, and I didn't have a lot of time to post it because so much of this is dependent on my schedule, which is kind of too bad. I'm always trying to think of, okay, what should I do next? How should I tweak this? How should I adjust this? But it's hard to know because it's, this is so much of the moment that you're exactly right. You put up something on meetup.com and 10 to 12 people show up, and as a local church pastor, it's like, when does that happen? I mean, churches are
never happens
to come out.
Yeah. No, one of the things that really struck me about this, in fact, just before I started the meetup, I ran some numbers and presented it to my parish council on, I looked through the 4 years that I'd been here, of all the new people that we had brought into our church, and I classified them according to different backgrounds. So some were Orthodox, but they just moved to town. So they were already Orthodox Christians, but they were looking for a church because they left their home church when they moved. And then there are some, a few that were Orthodox that had been here but were unaffiliated. There were a fair number of Christians from other churches who got interested in the Orthodox Church for one reason or another. I mean, there are people that move from church to church in Dallas all the time. That the one area that I really wasn't seeing. I wasn't seeing completely unchurched people. Like, how do you reach people? How do you meet them? And then this guy shows up who was completely unchurched, and Peterson sent him to me. And I thought about it and I realized, okay, so there are millions of people watching this Canadian psychologist talk about the Bible, and they're listening to him tell them that that there is meaning in life, but you're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to pick up your damn cross and struggle uphill. If there is ever a warm market for the Orthodox Church, like, if I'm being cynical, like, he has identified the warm market. Like, here it is. What are you going to do? So, at least this way I get to meet some.
I'm completely on the same page, and that was what struck me when. So I'm watching this, and I'm fascinated, and just like you, I'm learning a ton from him, and I'm thinking some new thoughts, and it's sending me on errands, and then I start getting, then I just look at Reddit, and I look at the comments in his things, and I look at email groups, and I'm thinking, there's just a whole lot of people out there. They can't talk to Peterson because he's way up on the status rocket. So who are they going to talk to? And then people go to these things, and they're like, I want to talk to someone. Who can I talk to? And
virtual conversations are nice, but they're not the same as conversations in real time with real people.
That's right.
And I agree with all the things that you say about institutions too. I mean, we need them. We need connection with people, and it's really lacking in our culture, in our the times that we live in are really very isolated times, and I think that's part of the reason for the phenomenon that we're seeing too, as much as anything else.
Yeah. So what's the next thing? Where does this go? Do we keep doing meetups? Because I'm always thinking about
Right.
What do I need to do next?
Well, I'd like to try to steer the conversation a little bit. I'd like to see if I can't get Pajot and one of the Weinstein brothers to get on a stage together. I'm tinkering with that idea. It would be a neat event to see live, but then it would be one more little piece on the YouTube trail, and maybe we can nudge the conversation towards some of the things that I think are most interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah. I really like the Weinstein brothers. I think they're great.
Yeah. They're really smart, and they're really fun. Well, that would be one of the interesting things has, of course, been, Pangburn went in there and organized the Peterson Sam Harris conversations, which I thought were helpful. But now Pangburn's kind of, self-destructed, it sounds like.
A disaster.
Patreon, which was another institution that was really facilitating a lot of this. Now that's all coming apart. And again, people don't recognize that these other things that are alongside are really foundational to the development of a movement. And so, Patreon is now, they've run aground. Rebel Wisdom is, as I think David Fuller in the UK is still pumping out materials, and throwing up interviews, which is really good. But I think you're right in that it would be just about any way that we can figure out how to host more conversations. And I sort of liked it that, that it was an atheist, Pangburn doing it, because then there's no suggestion that, this, again, another Christian opportunist. I remember when I first put my video up, there were a number of comments like, yeah, here's some pastor going to ride Jordan Peterson's coattails. And especially in the Protestant world, we tend to be known as opportunists definitely more than the Orthodox, perhaps more than the Roman Catholics, but
that's, maybe it's just because we're small. we don't get the attention. I had a friend who was traveling through West Texas and saw a sign for rapture insurance, a flyer in a cafe. And I said, "What's rapture insurance?" He said, "Well, in case of the rapture, they'll take care of your pets." Well, the obvious question is, who exactly is going to be taking care of my pets? But they had thought of that, and you were assured that all of their very qualified caretakers were either Catholic, Episcopalians, Jews, Muslims, or atheists. And I said, "You know why we didn't make that list?" And he said, "Yeah, because they never heard of us." I said, "Exactly."
Well, part of, the Orthodox are so new in some ways on the American scene.
Yep.
And before the Jordan Peterson thing, I read Molly Worthen's. She had written a really nice piece. Not piece, but a really nice book on evangelicalism. I can't remember the title right now. The Orthodox very much get mentioned in there. I mean, the Orthodox have been, they pop up now and then. Sure. One of the things that I read talked about the fact, like, someone would send me links to Ancient Faith Radio and, some of that kind of stuff sometimes. Mm-hmm. And of course, reading Rod Dreer's blog, I think that's done a lot to give the Orthodox more visibility.
Sure.
One of the interesting conversations I heard was reflection on how, whereas let's say in Russia or Greece or any of the Eastern countries where you've been the established church,
right,
now coming to the United States in this crazy religious marketplace,
very different scene.
Yeah, how this then changes the Orthodox in terms of, in a sense, you are the fresh face on the block.
Right. And yet we've been around from the beginning. Or at least the church has. I'm kind of new myself. But no, it's interesting. And, I think there are growing pains as there are with any immigrant church. With the the Antiochian church, like my parish, for instance, was started by people, a few families of Lebanese, Syrian, and Palestinian descent, so a lot of them came over around the turn of the 20th century, and then there were a couple more waves. So some of these people are just Texans and Oklahomans now, but then we've also got people who are just arriving too. No, I think that it definitely changes us. It has to change us, and that should be expected. Every time the church has moved to a new place, it's encountered a new culture and incorporated and baptized some parts of that culture, and at least in some places a new language, and that's always been the way it works. You've got the tradition, and you have to stay true to the past, but that tradition has to be rearticulated in a new time and a new place. It has to be represented here and now. And I mean, back to Peterson, I think one of the most impressive things about him is that he does such a good job of engaging our culture as it lives and thinks and talks right now, and you know, doing a much better job of it than most Christians are. And you know, I think we can learn a lot from him. I think my preaching has changed since I got acquainted with him. Yeah. For one thing, I learned from him a way to engage political discussion without being overtly political. You know, like you can talk about things like ideology and maybe even ideological possession and the need to engage people that you disagree with without thinking that they're your enemy, without thinking that they're evil. And you know, I really appreciated Jonathan Haidt's work on that. And you know, yesterday I even joined a group called Better Angels that I saw an interview with one of the representatives on the Glenn show, and they're a group that's engaged in this effort, trying to get red and blue types together and just actually confront each other, meet each other, because that happens less and less these days. We tend to be very segregated on ideological lines, and that's a scary thing.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rambling, but
no.
It's been really good talking to you.
Well, it is a scary thing. And when I look at the current government shutdown, that's emblematic of the two sides getting to a point where they're not able to work productively together. I studied American history. That was my undergraduate work at Calvin College. And I don't remember which historian was it, but said, you know, the genius of the American political system is compromise. And that's something that is currently lost. And it's, you know, right now there seems to be very little possible gain from this shutdown other than political points.
Right.
And that's a misplaced focus. And that polarization is, you know, the numbers of people that would be upset because their child married someone of the other political party, you know, those numbers continue to rise. And that's a real problem.
You know, Republicans used to go to church with Democrats, and vice versa, and I don't think that happens very much anymore. You know, we're much more likely to choose a church where everyone agrees with us. Yeah,
politically, more than even doctrinally.
Exactly, and that's not good.
No. And that's one of the things that I've been pleased at Living Stones. We've continued to be, we're in Sacramento, so there's some members of the congregation that work in the Capitol building as staffers for one party or another, and there are other members of the congregation that are dyed-in-the-wool members of the other side, and so we can't not talk about politics at all, but politics has to be relativized, and politics does become the central filter of your worldview. you basically you become a very short time person because the political scene continues to change.
Right. Right.
Well, we've been talking for a little while. Do you have any, and I've dominated the, I pushed this conversation along. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I really appreciate what you're doing. I'm always impressed with the volume that you put out, and I hope you keep doing it.
I don't see the volume. It was so funny because when I posted a 5-minute video a couple of weeks ago, I got all these comments like people are a little miffed that, you know,
Right.
how dare you put out 5 minutes? And to me, the volume is
pretty more.
It's just a function of, you know, because you know as well as I do, it's a whole lot more work to preach a short sermon than a long one.
Sure.
And so it's all just first drafts and no cuts and no editing. But
no, it's good stuff. It's really good. And man, I spent a lot of time in the car. So you know, keep it coming.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk, and
likewise.
God's blessing on your group. I mean, again, with my group, I don't know where any of this thing goes, but I just think this is exactly the thing I need to be doing now. And I'm having so much fun, and I wish more people would do it.
May it be blessed.
May it be blessed. Well, thank you, David. Thank you so much for talking. Bye-bye.
Bye.